All right, 928. Let's talk about the scouting app. Welcome to the scouting app. This is a real-world Django application, and right now this is for Team 2073 scouting system. Handles everything from Google OAuth authentication to like real-time data visualization, and this is kind of for complete beginners or just some seasoned developers. Obviously, if you're a very seasoned developer, there's documentation on the GitHub, so you probably go ahead and read that. So if you're a seasoned developer, this video is not for you, but if you just want to watch it just because, totally go ahead. I'm gonna be like explaining every single piece. So of course, from people who know, this is gonna be very boring. Everything from like Linux server setups to JavaScript to make the front end more interactive. This is because I'm trying to pass on as much documentation and knowledge about the scouting app as possible. Because I didn't have that when I needed it, and so I'm here making this video because I want you guys to understand it. So by the end of this video, you should be able to understand how to build a production-ready Django application that can handle a moderate amount of users and process a lot of data points all at once and maintain some pretty alright security standards that would make Matt Bowden pretty proud. Alright, so let's start off. I have the env.txt, right? So for any beginner, we use GitHub to push our code to online so we can store it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our a GitHub right here, and I have my script in the other thing, but don't worry about that. So we're going to come here. Let's go to the organization. Let's go to the scouting backend 2025. So right here we have the source code for the backend, which is what we're analyzing right now. Now, imagine we had a secret key that helps us, say, log in, right? We wouldn't want to push that information to say, let's say constants.py, right? And then say, oh yeah, your password's right here. Well, anyone can go to this website and they can say, oh, this is their password, so we're just going to go ahead and hack their website now, right? So we don't do that. We use environment files. In this example, we use a .env file. This is like environment. These are like variables set within your operating system. And this is good because obviously the system handles sensitive strategic data, and this could expose our team's strategy to competitors or just like just bad practice and like access to our database and stuff. So obviously never hard code secrets. We have things like Cloudinary, which hosts our images, our blue lines auth key, so we don't want people making requests on our behalf, and of course our database URL. Which we're not using Tembo anymore, but for Supabase, we don't want people to like clear our database, like exfiltrate data, so we use an environment variable, and of course here is supposed to be like a Google Cloud API key, and that the point of that was so that we could log in with Google, and that would be very bad because then anyone could log in and view our data without needing any of that. So of course, sensitive information you put in an environment variable. I think GitHub by default should just not take .env files, and that's just one way to keep your code safe, and especially like your secrets, right? And then let's go to I think it's settings.py for our scouting backend. So we have things like cross-site forgery requests, or request forgery, right? So this is like this basically like tricks users into performing actions that they didn't intend. Not too much of an issue kind of for the scouting backend, but if we have here, let me find it, Django.middleware, CSRF view middleware. So this is just general preventions against common attacks like cross-site request forgery. So like when a form is submitted, so if you're like submitting pit scouting forms, Django has to verify that the tokens match, and without this, a malicious website could submit forms on behalf of a logged in user, which obviously we don't want. And then let's go ahead and I'm just like going through like security things that the scouting app goes through, just because we have to make sure that just like understand like general security around it. I don't know how relevant this is. I am reading off the script right now that I semi-prepared, but don't worry about that. So in production, cookies are sent over HTTPS. That's like a secure network protocol, and for this purposes, for like cookies. You know how like some sites ask you for cookies, they use it to track you, but in this case, we use it to verify whether a user is logged in. And this prevents like session hijacking on unsecured networks. So I guess let's imagine a scout is using public Wi-Fi. Without this protection, like attackers could steal their session and access the scouting system, right? Then we have what is it? I think we need to see the like the models. I think. Hold on, where is it? I think so. I think what we should talk about next is like SQL injections. I don't assume a lot of like new people or like know. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Funny. Like know too much about SQL injections, which is okay. I think you just generally need to know like why they matter and how they like relate to us and stuff. So like here in the scanner, right? So in a database, right, we write information and then that information is given back to you like when it's requested, right? So in a SQL injection, sometimes attackers can inject code directly into the database, and then the next time code is, or the next time that information is pulled, it can escape, say, HTML or JavaScript and run malicious code, right? So here we use like an object filter and stuff, and Django handles like escaping functions within the database, and this converts like text into like different types of or like special queries that make SQL injections impossible. So just for like future reference, kind of try to like stick to this stuff because we don't want people to like inject stuff into our database. And I mean, obviously, since we're logged in with Google, hopefully nobody on Team 2073 does that, but just in case. These are just like general practices. Of course, like in the future, if we plan to make other things that may be public, we don't want to do that. Then we should also have like input validation and sanitization. So some good security practice is never trust the user, right? User can always like input some malicious stuff or even just mess up something in their input, right? And so you want to sanitize and check their inputs to make sure that things don't get messed up and may crash or like reveal any data they're not supposed to see within the scouting app, right? So let's look here at like forms.integer field, right? So Django will validate all input, and so integer fields ensure weight is like actually a number, right? So instead of like let's say like an alert or something to query our database, right, and ask, hey, what is this and this, right? These make sure that they're like accidental errors and malicious input either don't crash the server or or like our malicious input and try to like pull out data, right? So let's say like you say weight might be like 145, and what do you actually put like type out the word 145? Then you try to divide, say 145 divided by 4. We can't divide a word by a string. That would probably crash the server. So that's why we have input validation, and then obviously for the other hacker case, but I think that should kind of make sense. But also, I know I'm running this on a Windows machine, but let's go ahead and talk about Linux setup and deployments. So currently, or at least what used to happen was the scouting app used to be on Vercel, and Vercel is a microservice, right, where they only host the front end of a website, and then so that means they don't store anything on their servers, right? And that would mean you can't like you can't store persistent things like say in the pick list, right? We have like our JSON files for the pick list, right? You can't store these files and change them because they're Vercel is like a read-only server, and so you can't make changes, right? But I've transferred over the scouting app to my own personal server, and we're running it off Linux. So I thought we would talk about some Linux setup stuff. And for complete beginners, I don't know if I'm covering everything about Linux, but obviously it's an operating system. You may want to do your own independent research more into Linux because that is definitely important. And being able to like debug errors, or at least generally, or having some common knowledge about Linux is good. But obviously, you won't know everything. And I still chatgpt stuff about Linux, so to not know everything is fine. But to generally have some knowledge is the best you can do, and that's okay. So kind of we need like we have, or at least for me, I use my I'm hosting this on my own server, and so we'll go here, and here I'm running the scouting app. This should be the latest deployment version, right? So right now I'm using things like gunicorn and tmux. Tmux is like a terminal editor, right? So you see how I'm typing in a terminal right now, right? This creates different instances of terminals, right? And so you can see here like I'm running this on tmux, and it's running the scanning app in its own like little terminal, right? So you kind of want to have like a little general knowledge about of Linux, and so for Linux you want to use like process managers like gunicorn and tmux, and in hosting these things you want nginx. It's like it's a reverse proxy. So a reverse proxy being like let me pull up my drawing. So let's say a user, right, wants to go to 2073.com, right? And there's a forward facing IP 64 564 blah 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 blah, right? So that's going to be the server, right? And then let's say we're running multiple processes on the server. We want to know we want like we want to point to a specific process, right? So nginx is a reverse proxy. It'll say, hey, yeah, point here, this is the service you're looking for. Point here, look for the service, right? Whereas a proxy is like, you know, the user can send out multiple requests from different places into a single server, right? So we use this, or I use this in my production server to like forward my ports and then make sure that everything gets in place. So of course look through that, because that is definitely important. You may want to do your own independent research on it. Nginx, not too big of a deal. I think later in the year you should probably ask me about Nginx. If I do yap about this tomorrow, I know I'm talking to Sama about this. Shout out to Sama, you're super cool. But also do independent research about Nginx, and if you know someone, especially like who's working on the scouting app and they're still deploying on Linux, and they're using Nginx, definitely ask them about that, because it's kind of important to know. Let's see, looking at my script right now. Process management. You want to learn like just basics of like process management, like how to kill processes and stuff. How to just even start the server. So you go like Python 3 manage.py run server. I'm not gonna run it because I'm already running it, so that would conflict, get a weird error. Understanding like ports and networking. So right now this is running on an Oracle VM, so you have a firewall, which is like software that blocks your network traffic, right? So you may have like you may have the physical server, right, with their with the antenna, right, getting data in, right, and then the software layer will be like, oh hey, we see like this IP trying to get in, right? Is this IP in our list? And if it's not, you know, they get kicked out, or they're not, or they just block it. They just don't let it in, right? But if they are allowed, they're let in. So that's very basics of a firewall, right? Then I'm hosting on Oracle. So I think for most cloud providers, unless we're hosting locally and in-house, which I don't think we will be, they have like ingress rules. So ingress meaning like in, and then egress meaning out. So you want to change ingress rules to let certain ports open. Doing some independent research about like TCP, although that's really not too relevant for scouting, but there are like layers to these things. So you want some very basic networking skills, like basically just opening and closing ports and making sure nothing's exposed, and then only opening ports for certain protocols like TCP, which just allow like general web traffic through. So for that, you may want to ask for more specification about that. There's like or even just learning it on the way, and learning how to like push to production is something you can learn on the way, but definitely doing like research ahead of time, like just watching even like a YouTube short about it, to just get like a really quick understanding is also good. Let's see. Should probably talk about the database. I think I'm just kind of just going in like random now. I mean, I'm reading off whatever the script is telling me. So I'm using Supabase for this because Tembo got shut down. This is our PostgreSQL database. PostgreSQL. You're gonna want to Google a little bit of that. It's just how we do databases, and gonna have to learn like how to push changes to a database, how to connect to them, like rate limits and stuff, and different types of databases, because that may be relevant for future like storage options that you want to make. So in this case, you would want to like connect to like you would want to learn like how to connect here. So in the future, when I probably make a video or something, or an explanation, or if it ever gets passed down, like databases, specifically like Supabase, taking like only IPv4 instead of IPv6. This kind of falls under the networking category, so understanding like why they don't let you use this stuff, mostly just because we're on a free plan, but a lot of like high level stuff that you kind of have to like learn or like Google. But if you have questions, ask ChatGPT or ask me, or comment down below. I really wish I could like go into like more depth or have like better structure to this thing, but that's hard. And then securing the website. So if you like host this on your own Linux website, you want to use certbot, CERTBOT, certbot. You want to use that for your SSL certificate if you ever host it on a domain like team2073.com. And that's if they ever let you, which I don't know if they will, but that's good. But you know what? I think I should stop talking about like arbitrary stuff and like general overhead that you may need to learn before you work on the scouting app, which is kind of bad. But you know what? Let's just talk about like the Django project. You know, the actual meat and bones of this thing. So we have the scouting backend 2025. We have scouting backend here. We have authenticate. Right, so this is the backend. This is what actually handles the website, like the template for like all the operations. We have authenticate. This handles the Google login, like login with Google. Excuse me. Teams. This is like the Teams page for where we will be viewing different team information at different events, and I'll show the scouting website in relation to this strategy. This is like the strategy page, and specifically like the dashboard, pick lists, and rankings, and the API for contacting the Blue Alliance API and getting specific information that we may need. So this kind of follows like Django. It's like a project. A project is a collection of apps, and each app will handle a specific functionality, right? So this is good because like the authenticate app could be dropped into a Django project that needs Google OAuth, right? And for like maintainability purposes, like is there a bug in QR scanning? Then you know where to look, which is like in the scanner app, right? So it's not like combined into one big file or something, right? It's like split up into things. It's also good for like team development stuff, so like different developers can work on different apps without it conflicting, right? So if you want to work on specifically scanner or scouting backend, it's good because you don't have to like edit the same file. Testing, you can test each app independently, and like settings.py, where's that? Yeah, settings.py here, or actually no, that's completely unrelated, but like basically you can do like all that stuff. So that's kind of why we use Django for this, but I don't really like Django. I may make a JavaScript version in the future. But we'll see how that goes. So I should probably like explain some of the settings.py stuff, especially for the database. So let's see. So let's talk about the database. So when we connect to the database, you have to get the database URL, and then it has the password, which you would specify. I think earlier I showed with the password, and then it would connect to it basically, and then max like connection age is like 600. Just says, hey, keep a database connection alive for 10 minutes, so that, because like without this, Django needs to create a new connection for each request, which is like really slow and can exhaust connection limits. So just make sure to like kind of keep that big. Postgres is not like a high-speed database, I don't think, so you kind of want to like keep sessions alive so you can keep pushing data, especially since like when we're scanning between matches, you get like 10 to like 11 requests, so keeping that connection alive for a while is very relevant. Although yes, probably you do want to go through a match to see like how scout techs like input data for sure, right? Then we have like static file configuration. So this is kind of interesting. So when we changed Python files in Django, like it'll automatically change, right? That's like they're like things that can vary, right? So vary as in like some data can like it can either be like you can input like a 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5, right? But that's not like set in stone, right? But there are static files, things that don't change, right? That's like our JavaScript. So we look here, static like dashboard.js, right? These do specific functions that will always happen within the database, right? So you want to tell Django where to look for these static files, right? And so what you do sometimes, or what you would do every time you change static files and you want to push them, you do Python 3 manage.py collect static. Right, and this basically collects the update of static files and it sends it to the to the static files, and then that's where Django accesses it. And you need to specify where those files are, right? So your URL like in the actual page would be like, let's say like team2073.com/static. That's where you'd find it, right? But the actual root file is static files, right? So in your actual files, it'd actually be like the actual directory would be called static files, right? But when we go on the website between2073.com/static, right? And then you have static and then scanner team strategy, right? So when you go into static files, right, you have team strategy, static scanners, right? Stuff like that. These are like the different subdirectories, and then you can pull all the JavaScript files from there. So all the static files in there. That's so that you just keep everything centralized. So it's not like searching 20 like everywhere for this one static file. All right. So let's move to models. This one kind of confused me when I first learned about it, but then I'm not very good at Django. But I'm kind of here just to make sure that some people try to understand it. So models define your database structure and business logic. So let's like examine some models and understand how like some of the design decisions. So let's go to authenticate and we'll go to models.py. Alright, so this is like intentionally minimal because we're not storing passwords because Google handles that, which is nice. The point of Google OAuth is that Google does the authentication for you, so that you don't have to worry about like storing usernames and passwords. That like your database can't be like compromised as badly. And like even if it is, it's probably just like a bunch of emails, which is fine. Not like they're too relevant for us, right? So we're not storing passwords because Google handles that, and names we get those from Google, or complex permissions because we use decorators for that. And like unique equals true, we just gotta make sure that this prevents email duplication, and then auto add now true sets like the timestamp that we created of like when we created stuff. These models define like what's in the database, right? So if you were to look like in the authorized user, right, of section of the database, you would see like, hey, when we're trying to pull authorized users, right, it'll contain emails and when it was an email and when it was created at, right? But yeah, basically that's kind of what you'd see in the database, and then when you want to change like something in the database, you'd be like, hey, Python manage.py, right? Create migrations, right? Create migrations as in being like, hey, I want to migrate to this new structure in my database, right? Create the migration that does that, right? So like read off the new contents in this models.py, and then migrate and actually push those migrations to the database and say, hey, I want you to add this column or delete this column or rename it to this, and this in the database. That way you can start pushing different kinds of data if you need to. Another example of that would be like in Teams, where we go to models.py, right? So when we're like changing, so like in 2026, and this is kind of relevant, right? So 2025 it was Reefscape, right? So you would want to know like, hey, what cage position are they hanging at? Are they what kind of algae picker do they have? What auto position are they at? Right? How many algae, how many coral can they pick up in their auto? Right? So these are going to vary throughout the year, or throughout like each season, right? So you're gonna want to see like, hey, how many algae can they pick up, right? Maybe next year, or like let's say the year before, right? Like where it was crescendo, right? You want to see like auto, like amp, like how many amps can they get? I didn't really watch the crescendo thing. I can't lie. I don't think anyone watching this now has probably watched crescendo, right? But you want to see like how much of the max they can do, how much of a max task can they do in auto, right? That's just examples of things that they can do, right? Can they get out? What does the robot picture look like, right? So you want to define all of these things to make sure that the database has that stuff, so that later when you pull that from the database, strategy can look at it, and then they can have that stuff. But obviously, you need to define stuff in your database so you actually have stuff to store, right? So these kind of things will definitely be changing, right? So team number, right? Some of these things like don't change, like team number, event, match number, qualifier, right? Like is it practice, qualifiers, semifinals and finals. Right, so like playoffs, practice says that right there, right? Where's their start position? Have they missed any auto, right? And so for reef skate, it's like L1, L2, L3, L4, right? Like levels for the reef, right? And then like the net processor and how many algae they removed, right? So you're gonna want when you go through in like 2026, 2027, whoever's like watching this, you do want to change this stuff. That's also that's like I think come January when they actually release the new like theme for FRC, and probably by then I think I'll just like record my me like developing how and like the thought process for going into this thing. Hopefully, I don't know if I'll get to that, but be hopeful and spam me a lot on Discord to make that video. Right, so like let's look at like unique underscore together, right? So the unique together constraint is crucial because like for us, we might have a different robot configuration than a different competition, and so this helps like prevent duplicate entries, right? And let's also notice like the character field, char field for drivetrain, instead of choices at the model level, this gives us like flexibility because if a team has a unique drivetrain not in our predefined list, we can still store it. These are kind of just examples, right? This is a character field. Character field being like it's just a text box basically. And then we can go down to like match data. I think we just looked at that, right? Like JSON fields. So JSON is like a type of storage format. It kind of looks like, I think I just showed it earlier with the pick list, right? This is what JSON looks like. Right? It's like it has like brackets and it defines that you may want to look a little bit into JSON, right? But JSON field is powerful because it stores like robot's autonomous path and with the replay system, and like we could have created a separate path point model with XY coordinates, but a JSON field is just simpler and more flexible for this use case. And the quantifier field uses choices to ensure data consistency, so we can store qualifications as quals, Q, or etc. But obviously we choose to enforce like a certain standard for that. This probably isn't like a good standard, but nevertheless still a standard. So let's look at like strategy. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well. Right, so array field in PostgreSQL, or like array field is like PostgreSQL specific, but it's like very useful because we're storing lists of team members directly into our database, right? So like the list being like who we're gonna pick, like the first picks like is a list of like let's say like 254, 1678, right? That's a list, and then the second list would be like the second pick, so maybe like I don't know, Cheesy Poos, I don't even know the numbers, I can't lie, right? Right, so the alternative would be to have a separate picklist entry model. That's kind of overkill for this use case. So again, in here we use an array. I think if you took the Python course, you know what an array is. So it'd probably kind of look like this on the database. It would look like 2073 and then 1678, 254, stuff like that, right? And that would store for like say like first pick, right? That would be what it looks like inside the database. So yeah, you kind of want to do that. User input validation. I'll probably release the script, probably like drop it in the description because I don't think I'm being very clear, but hopefully doing some stuff correctly, hopefully. Let's see. Views, process requests, interact with models, return responses. So let's look at like the views.py. It's kind of for Django. I think it's like Django specific. So views are kind of where like the big stuff happens. They process requests, interact with models, and return responses, right? So when you input something in HTML, this goes to the views.py, and this is actually what processes the stuff, right? So sort of like team page, right? If you were at the, I just realized I should probably pull up the actual scouting app on my side. Let me just go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's think about like the teams page, right? actually, let's do like pit scouting, right? So we go to the teams, we go to pit scout, right? And in the backend, it would actually print like, hey, method competition code. I don't really want to pull up my Ubuntu server earlier, but let's say like, where is it? So we have like drivetrain, right? So here's like the database stuff. So like you can this updates the database stuff, right? So you have drivetrain, right? Weight, length, width, they all kind of correspond here. Intake design, scoring locations, cage positions, right? This tells us like when we click submit here, it would send an API. It would send a request to the server and tell it to update the database to have this information that we input here. So you see like over bumper, source. They can score L3, L4. They can climb deep, under shallow, algae picker, stuff like that, right? And then you'd send that, and then it would update it to the database. So that's kind of what Views does. It's like specific logic for certain things that you do on the website, right? So some cool things for like view only Team 2073, which like defines like, hey, you have to be logged in to access this like information, right? So this logic says you have to be logged in, right? Team 2073 members can only view testing competitions, and Team 2073 members can't submit post data, right? But authorized users have full access, which is kind of what it's doing here. So where's wrapper? Oh my gosh. Wait. Oh wait, hold on. That's the authentication thing. It's not in Teams. What? Where the heck? View only wrapper. Yeah. So like when you see the header like Team 20 view only for Team 2073, that's like specifying what you can and can't do when like with views, and it'll tell you what you can and can't do. There's all like API endpoints, right? So let's look at dashboard. That's in strategy. Where's strategy? Views, dashboard. So let's look for dashboard. Right. So these define, hey, you can only view if you're Team 2073, and it's cross-site request forgery exempt. Right, and this endpoint would check for like a request body, like if the method is a post, right, and it's requested with XML HTTP request, right, and it's looking for, hey, are they requesting a qualifying match, semifinal match? Let's go over to the dashboard and look at that, right? So when you click load data, it's going to send a post request to the database and ask, hey, first, TBA, what teams played on qualification match, say, number 1, right? And then what data do we have on those people, right? So it's going to take in a comp level, so it's going to qualifications, practice, and playoffs, right? So prac would be shortened to PM, qualifications as in QM, and then playoff as in SF. And then it would get the single match comp code, right? So the comp code being 2025 kata, and then the match number, which is 1, which we just specified here, right? And then it creates some empty lists for the teams, and then it gets the C fetch team match average, so it'll go to the database and say, hey, get this information, and then get the match averages, like in our data recorded by the scouts. They're on average, their score was like this, and this, right? And then respond with that information, and I think if we try to load it here, right, it doesn't load anything because we have no data on that team, right? But again, it calls external TBA Blue Lines API to get match information, calculates team performance averages, and then returns a structured JSON response, right? And so this, and I think I should probably go back to the CSRF exempt. It's needed because like when you make requests from JavaScript, like they don't automatically include tokens which say like, hey, this is from the website, not from some like attacker. So we just kind of have to make it exempt for that kind of purpose. Again, review like cross-site forgery because that's important. Let's go to like templates and front-end integration. So templates generate the HTML that the users see, and then like the rest of the stuff is filled in by like the JavaScript and the backend. So right here we have like the pit. Actually, let's look at team page scouting, right? So we'll define stuff like the drivetrain, the length, intake design. Let's go over to teams first, actually. So, what is this? This is the pit's team. This is the pit status. That's not relevant, right? So we define a table here. We have match, leave, A1, auto, teleop, right? Stuff like that. So these are predefined, right? And then later on, when we call like when we get to the database and actually has data, it'll call like, hey, get the match number. If it's the quantifier, what is it, right? Did they leave during auto? Did they score an auto L1, L2, etc.? Did they use like in the teleop like how often did they use the processor? Did they remove anything? Right, these all like fill in the stuff here, right? So these templates are like inheritance systems because they let us like define the layout once and then extend it everywhere, right? And like you can use like JavaScript to like fetch like available competitions from the Django backend, which is kind of like what we're doing here, or like fetch competition data from the Django backend, which is what we do, and then populate like this information later on, and then remember like certain user selections and stuff. I would talk about the replay system, but we're just not going to do that. I mean, it's pretty simple. Basically, it just stores stuff in the database, and then it'll hard code like a dot to move over to where they went during auto. It's not very intuitive. I wish it was better, but it was a pretty like lackluster system. But if there are questions about it, you can totally ask. I don't think this system is used very often, but it's still recorded just because I'm not too sure why. So let's talk about something some relevant and fun stuff. Let's talk about the scanner. So this is the QR code scanner. It's pretty cool, actually. I guess my camera's not working. That's okay. So QR code solves some pretty big problems, like how do we get data from like our tablet form to a computer. So obviously we have tablets to record matches, and that basically just encodes a bunch of JSON and then into a QR code, which we scan in. So we have a QR code scanner library, which I think we specify here. So this is like just for like some public project that where we like skidded. Actually, I didn't skid it, someone else did, but we skidded a bunch of data or like a bunch of like code that helps us scan a QR code, right? And then you would press start here, and then you would scan the QR code, and then it'll tell us like what data we have and if we're missing any data, and like what we need to fulfill, and it'll highlight the like which scan region we need for like better user experience or like interface, I guess, and then it'll let's go to the views, actually. Scanner, where is it? Post data to server, where's that, guys? Right, so here's one of our things. So once it like gets the QR code, then it's going to include a cross-site reverse forgery token for security, set proper headers for JSON, and then see whether the response was successful or an error, and it'll include like credentials and send like a session cookie and stuff. And so it'll this basically sends it off to the server, and then it'll see if the server like accepts the response. So we look like at the server here, at the actual like backend that processes it. We'll see like the scanner method, and it's looking, these are the required keys, right? Because if you do this and you try to like load other stuff, like it's just gonna break if you don't do that. So we have to require these keys, and if it doesn't have those keys, say, hey, we're missing these keys, right? Look for these keys, and once you got them, then it'll input into the database, and we'll tell you that it was successful, right? So again, it takes in the JSON, reads it from the request body, validates the QR code, like that contains the JSON, which is like kind of validating here. Like if it's missing a key, this is the validation basically. And then creates a database record, right? So get or create these things, and also create these things inside the database, and these are defined in the models. Oh, not, I guess not. Right. So it would create these, and then it would send it off to the. It would basically send it off to the database, and then if there's an appropriate error message, if it does throw one, then it does. So then let's talk about like the API. So this is basically like if you go to a website, you make a request and it calls for some data, right? So Blue Alliance has an open API that helps us like pull certain information, right? So get team events, right? Get team events here. If you wanted to know like, hey, is 2073 going to go to Madtown? Well, let's go check. And then you request and get team events, and it'll say, hey, Team 2073 is participating at SAC Regionals, Johnson Division, Einstein Division, right? All these different competitions. So these are external requests. They get like the match schedule for a team, get the team list at a certain event, and a single match like some information like, hey, which alliance were they on? Were they on red or blue alliance for the match? So here we have like API. This kind of like demonstrates like some API security, right? So we have like OS environment, the TVA authentication key that was stored in the .env here, and again like in the env.txt we have like the TVA authentication key, right? So we want to store that securely, and then it'll just call it in the code later when it needs to, when you do make a request to the API, right? And then there's some like data transformation stuff. Where is it? I don't think it's in here. No, it doesn't. I don't think it is. Yeah, I think the best way to understand this wouldn't just be to like read the code, but actually to go to the Blue Alliance website. So ask me about that or like check documentation. I don't know. It might be in documentation, but if not, go directly to the Blue Alliance website and see how their API works, right? Like if you need a get or a post request, and then like what it returns and whether that information is relevant to the scouting website, right? So definitely a lot of like error handling and stuff. Just make sure to add those. Real-time features, WebSocket consideration. So for like the pick list, the pick list is just like, hey, should we pick these lists should we pick these teams during what is it, like selections of alliances? Well, right now what we do is we do polling. Polling is like just sending a request every say like 5 seconds. There are different types. You can have like a single request that pulls data all at once, or you have polling where it just keeps checking, hey, is it there? Is it here yet? Is it here yet? Or you have WebSockets where it's just a continuous connection. It's like a phone call. Think about it like that. So for the pick list, where's the pick list? It's under strategy. Where is the pick list? Yeah, pick list, right? So we have some things like saving temporary stuff. So there's like caching. Caching is like temporary storage, right? So it's like, hey, we're going to store this temporarily, and then we'll make requests to the database, say, every like 10 seconds. That way you don't like overload the database, right? But we have like things here where you can like fetch updates, and this is polling. Polling is simple, but it's kind of inefficient sometimes because every 5 seconds, like every connected client makes a request, even if no data is changed. So, I mean, it's a feature that works, but just considerations for the future. So yeah, in the future, probably add like WebSockets. WebSockets are basically just continuous like data streams. So if something updates, like everybody's notified about it, and you don't have to make like separate requests because everyone's on the same channel. It's kind of how things like Discord, definitely a lot of like web chatting platforms where they use a lot of webhooks. In this instance, I didn't make it because Vercel didn't support WebSockets, but it's actually a free game to go ahead and do that. Now that we're hosting on Linux. So if you want to research WebSockets, please do. They're actually very interesting. I have a bunch of projects about them. Please ask me about them. I love to talk about WebSockets. They're super fun. I know a lot about them. So we could talk about like security, but we're probably not going to do that for now just because I feel like this video is getting really long. I would talk in the future about like Docker and like continuous integration and development stuff, but I think I'm gonna just have to end it off here. I feel like there's a lot of questions, a lot of open-ended things that we could talk about, especially like regarding networking and general setup on Linux. There's a lot of things that you would have to Google on ChatGPT. I would say this tutorial probably isn't the best. I'll just drop like the docs or like the documentation and the script for this thing because I think me yapping about this was probably a bad idea, but if you want to listen, if you listened this entire way, congratulations. I think I just wasted 44 minutes and 36 seconds of your life, so yeah, I'm probably gonna post this. I don't know who's gonna watch this all the way to the end, but I mean, if you do, shoot, I'm actually honored that you did. It's 10:12. I need to wake up for water polo tomorrow. Anyways, I'll probably try to get a better video about the development of this stuff. I don't know how well this helps most beginners. I guess I assumed a lot of things, and I'm kind of trying to give pointers towards how to like get started with the scouting backend, because there's a lot of overhead and like learning curve stuff that you need to do beforehand, or like to know before you actually get onto this stuff, because if you don't know it, you are a little screwed, and you may break the website or expose something that's very critical, and you do not want to do that. So definitely ask questions. I probably should have said that in the beginning. Please, please, please ask questions. They're not dumb, and if you think they're dumb, just ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't judge. Preferably use a different AI. I use Claude Sonnet 4 and Amazon Q, as you can see. So, Sonnet 4 is pretty good at what it does. Obviously, don't rely on it too much. I unfortunately do. I still do a lot of work on coding, so don't worry. I'm not like completely incompetent, but yeah. Thank you for listening, guys. Mr. Luke out.